Hey YouTube, don't mind all the background noise. I'm just recording a quick video here on Brigham Young University, Idaho campus. I keep busy here, that's for sure. Anyway, characters of DUNE. I want to talk about Duncan Idaho for a minute. He's a very interesting character in this series. He is the most constant character throughout the series, funny enough, considering how he dies in the first book. But with Duncan Idaho, we see a very interesting thing. We see a man who is motivated by honor and loyalty, and he's very good about how he goes about those things. But I talked before about in the Saga overview how the aim of Frank Herbert's novels is to add a word of caution toward leadership, a word of caution toward following and devoting yourself to be a follower. And with Duncan Idaho is the manifestation of some of the liabilities that come from following. We see him do some great things in the first book, like when he dies. You could say this is his King Leonidas at the hot gates, so to speak. His honorable go down to save the Lord, or I guess the Duke of House Atreides, who's now Paul at this point. He earns more immortality in a sense in this moment because later on, when he's made a Gola and comes back again and again, Leto II uses him to perfect the genes of the Atreides line. But prior to that, even Emperor Shaddam IV and his Sardaukar obviously saw value in Duncan Idaho and what he did in taking on the Sardaukar. So we see this moment of, I guess you could say, ancient Greek excellence as he goes down in blazing glory. But then we see an evolution with his character. He starts to have more of his existential crisis in his Gola lives as he repeatedly dies and is killed, sometimes in more glorious ways than others. But all the same, I think Duncan Idaho is meant to take us on the journey of being a follower to becoming a leader and thinking for ourselves and making choices based on the wisdom of a long track record of predictable outcomes that come from simply being a follower. So in this, Duncan Idaho is a very interesting character. He's definitely one of my favorites in the series. And by the way, Jason Momoa in the DUNE movie, oh my goodness, what a perfect choice. We'll see how far they go with that. They might keep developing that story more. I think it'd be cool if they went as far as Messiah at least and brought Duncan back as a Gola. It would at least introduce that element of the story. But anyway, in conclusion, I think Duncan Idaho is probably the character that we're meant to relate to in this series. Like, he's a sword master, he's very interesting, he's a warrior, and so his excellence is not necessarily something that we're going to relate to straight away, but it's his position, it's his predicament in learning how does he think for himself, how does he learn to live life for himself, because prior to that it's honor based and devoting himself to people and to causes. And I think the wisdom we gain from watching Duncan Idaho is seeing how those leaders and those causes can not only disappoint you, but they can betray you, even their very purpose. So again, it's a cautionary tale. Granted, there are leaders that do good work, that are self-effacing, that make the cause the important thing, and there can be good times to follow leaders. But we must acknowledge the imperfections of man and think for ourselves and be wise enough to recognize when perhaps there is a cause or a leader that we just should not follow. And Duncan Idaho is essentially the character that interacts with this wisdom and learns through a long line of success and failure on how to best discern that. So Duncan Idaho essentially represents a conversation that we all need to have with ourselves in this regard, and he embodies that very well. Now, spoiler alert. Turn off the video now if you don't want to hear something about the last book. All right, you've been warned. In the last book, he goes off into the void with... we got some noise now. I'll just try to be quick. He goes off into the void to the uncharted universe to decide for himself. At this point, he's his own master. I think that is where he's reached the pinnacle of his evolution, where he is thinking for himself, he's making a decision, And he's walking away from being dedicated to cultures for the sole sake of being dedicated to them. And I think that's the evolution that we kind of need to follow for ourselves to get to that point where we do think for ourselves and go out into uncharted waters, not because the culture told us to or because a leader told us to, but because we generally thought for ourselves. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. So we'll see you later.